Ayo Gbeleyi is the Commissioner for Finance in Lagos State. He talks to Business Incorporated about what he thinks may be the likely implication of the postponement of the general elections on the Nigerian economy.
In terms of the impact on the economy, it's going to be a bit significant in the sense that, as you very well know, in an election year, things tend to be quite slow. So while the business community and the investors, especially the foreign investors, are all looking forward to a situation where we quickly put the elections behind us in the first 2 months of the year, which means that by the second quarter we should begin to see certain improved level of economic activities. Regrettably, with a further 6 weeks push out, it means that, practically the whole of the first 2 quarters of the year will be spent on electioneering and the swearing in of a new government, as it were. So we have a situation on our hand, and the earlier we are out of this, the better in terms of the economic and business outlook. You will recall that while in all this while, the petroleum industry bill, for example, has been delayed due to one reason or the other. We are not seeing the much needed investment in the oil and gas sector, especially in the upstream sector. So that is still going to be held back among many other decisions that have been taken. Investors are always looking for a very predictable and stable macroeconomic environment. And in the current climate, where you have a bit of unclear political outlook, they will continue to hold on their key investment decisions as it will affect our country today.
Do we have any economic implications for this, for the country?
Well, certainly, if businesses are holding back on investment decisions, it means that the expected benefit of those business decisions will not manifest either to the company itself or to the economy. It means that new jobs that are meant to have been created as a result of new investment being made in the economy will not be created. So ultimately, it also impacts on the living standard of the people. And also, the businesses themselves will not get the kind of investment return they are looking forward to in that particular year. And you can't claw back a lost opportunity. So businesses are equally suffering and hemorrhaging from the current situation we have on our hand.
What do you think about investors outside of the country?
In the foreign investment world, most people would not decide on making fresh investments on an economy where the government is in transition or you are going through an electioneering period. They would rather wait until after the election, see the outcome, and see the policy direction of the new government for them to be able to make the kind of decisions they need to make to invest in a particular country. That's not peculiar to Nigeria. It's usually the case all over the world. In recent time, when Brazil was holding its election, we saw a similar case until they finished the election late last year.
Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar was quoted as saying that the postponement of elections has actually increased economic uncertainty. Do you agree with him?
I perfectly agree with that position, and that also aligns with what I said earlier on, that investors would be nervous, investors would not want to make decisions. Again, if you see the kind of volatility we have experienced in the foreign exchange market, up until late last year, the official rate for the naira to the dollar was 155 naira. Today, we are beginning to see interbank rate that has now tested that psychological threshold of 200 naira to $1. That is significant for businesses whose operations are largely dependent on imported components. If you are buying a machinery, even if you look at, say, in the power sector, we are looking up to the GENCOs, the generating companies, to make new investment. We are looking up to the distribution companies to make new investment. Some of these investments are dollar denominated. They will be importing their generating plants. The discos will be importing meters, etc., improving their billing platform, involving in technology that can improve operational efficiency in the sector. So all of their budgets, all of their calculations will now have to be recalibrated, because you have seen a currency that has devalued by over 20% in recent time. And given the current uncertainty, you cannot even hedge your bets because you don't know where the volatility will end. So there is palpable apprehension in the economic sector.
You talked about the foreign exchange market in terms of the volatility that we're seeing in that market. And that also is being tied to the foreign reserves of the country. The latest figure from the Central Bank of Nigeria actually states that our foreign reserves have dropped by 700 million US dollars. Do you think that that has been impacted upon based on more demand for the greenback? Also considering the fact that we may have to spend more during this period?
Well, our economic managers need to be pursuing the right policy direction. They need to be showing more confidence in terms of the way they manage the economy to reassure the market that despite the situation we found ourselves, the economic fundamentals are still strong enough to continue to support the foreign exchange level that we're talking about and our fiscal balance, whether from the foreign reserve point of view or from the excess crude account. So these are the kind of statements that we expect them to be making to reassure the business community so that you can stem the tide of capital flight that we are beginning to see from the last quarter of last year and which is now being heightened this year, and more in particular since this decision was taken on Saturday. That's why the exchange rate crossed that psychological threshold on Monday. We have never seen, in recent history, where the interbank foreign exchange rate has crossed that $200 mark. And if experience is anything to go by, as soon as the elections are concluded and we see more clarity and certainty in the outlook, both politically, economically, and socially, you will begin to see a much more stabilized foreign exchange market as well as money market.
Are we going to see increased spending in government in the next 6 weeks? Of course, we all know that more campaigns may have to be done, more rallies, and all of that. Would that impact on the spending?
Well, I would say the political parties would have to clearly expend more resources. If you have, made a budget to place advertisement in the newspaper up until 26th of February, as it were, today you are going to make advertisements for additional 6 weeks by all the political parties. So clearly that requires more budget resources. It requires people traveling more than they are taught before. So we are going to spend more on travel, you are going to spend more on accommodation, and many other things that are the kind of logistic support you require to effectively prosecute an electioneering campaign. So yes, certainly we're going to see more spending on the part of the political parties.
Inflation may also be brought to the table. The last figure that we had from the National Bureau of Statistics states that inflation as of December was at 8%, and there are projections that it could rise to 8.2%, and that is just before the postponement. And now that the elections have been postponed, do you think that figure could also rise further?
Well, clearly, given the impact of exchange rates, which you are going to see a bit of a lag effect on the impact of devaluation on exchange rate, we expect that in the first quarter and of course into the second quarter, we will see that impact catching up on inflation rate. Though albeit it should be somewhat moderate, not something that will make headline. I don't see it in the double-digit level in the course of the next 6 weeks, as it were. I still think that we would manage to keep it under the double-digit level that we have seen in most part of 2014. So I see inflation rates well under 10%. Borrowing in itself is not a bad thing, provided that we borrow in a very fiscally responsible manner and in a very prudent way. What I mean by that is you do not borrow, you don't raise bond to fund your overheads or recurrent expenditure. You should typically raise bond to fund capital projects that will impact on the economic activities. In Lagos State, for example, all of our bond proceeds are channeled towards major capital development projects like the light metro rails transit, like some of the housing projects. Most of our major roads that we've embarked upon in the nook and crannies of the 57 local government area and local government development councils in the States. The 70 million gallons a day at the 2 water projects, etc. So we do not borrow, for example, to pay salaries. We don't borrow to pay for petrol in our cars. So provided that such level of fiscal prudence is applied in the borrowings of government, it will create a multiplier on economic activities. And when you look at time value of money, a road you can construct for ₦1 billion today, by tomorrow, probably you will need 1.2 billion. So if you borrow today prudently and you apply it solely towards funding that road project, you would have hedged against inflation, as it were. So we expect to see more of that by all tiers of government, and that will make the bond market a much more robust window to finance infrastructural projects for the country.
Nigeria has been considered as the most watched economy among frontier markets, and that's one of the reports from the Wall Street Journal Sentiment Index, which actually tracks frontier markets, and we were actually rated as the most watched economy. Now, the report also stated that investors are willing to come to the country to do business. Do you think the perception about the Nigerian economy may be changed somewhat based on this development?
Well, certainly the global multinational companies, yes, are looking at the huge opportunity in Nigeria. If you look at the demography, you have a very youthful population. That means that we also have a rapidly growing middle class. And when the middle class is growing, they would also have to spend on their needs. And these needs will include fast-moving consumer goods. They will include durable goods. And when you talk about durable goods, you are talking about cars, etc. You're talking about electronic equipment. When you talk about retail, they will need clothing, apparel. They will buy shoes, and all sort of things. So with a population of over 170 million, any serious player in the world will be looking at the most populous African nation, black African nation on earth, will be looking at the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, as it were. So yes, investors are peeping, looking into what is going on, but until we put this election behind ourselves, most of those investment decisions will still be on hold. So we need to quickly move in the right direction so that those peeping can actually, we can actually unlock those opportunities, and we can then see investment coming into our country in droves.
Do you have examples of these investment decisions that have been put on hold? Can you tell us one or two?
Well, I don't currently work in the private sector, so I wouldn't know what is going on in most of their boardrooms. But going by what you see and what you can sniff around based on the market intelligence, if you look at companies like General Electric that are making investment bets in the power sector, I'm sure that is something that at this point, I doubt that they will be closing out on most of those decisions until after the election. If you look at Siemens, and even General Electric itself, they play a lot in the healthcare delivery sector. So most of the equipment they are selling, those looking at opportunity of setting up maybe even assembly plants in Nigeria, like the telecoms original equipment manufacturers as well. So all of those guys will be hedging their bet now until after the election, So the earlier this happens, the better for the economy, the better for Nigerians, and in fact, the better for the world.
At this point, I'd like to thank you, Honorable Ayo Bileyi, for your time with us.
Thank you very much, Bolaji. I appreciate your time as well.
On this note, we call it a day here on Business Incorporated. If you've got questions, comments, or even contributions, you can send them to businessincorporated@channelstv.com. You can also reach me on Twitter. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. I am Bolaji Akinwale.